will now recognize my colleague, Ranking Member Crow, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. I would like to talk about the chronology leading up to the drawdown that I touched on in my opening remarks. You know, I served in Afghanistan multiple times. I served in Iraq. I've been in combat environments, and we know that the morale of forces is essential. The will to fight is the most powerful thing, right? More powerful than any weapon system, any strategy, any tactic. The will to fight, and morale is essential to that. So, at a moment where we're trying to enhance morale, when we're trying to embolden our partners, there were a series of just deeply troubling statements and comments coming out of the former president's White House and from the former president himself. And I just would like to start with you, General Sadat, on a few of these. Here you have President Trump tweeting out on October 7th of 2020, "We should have the small remaining number of our brave men and women serving in Afghanistan home by Christmas." Do you remember when that tweet went out?
I don't, but I was aware that he was trying to draw down troops to a minimum level.
What was the impact of this statement and your awareness and your force's awareness when these statements were being made?
Of course, statements made in Washington had a real impact, especially on us in the battleground. And these remarks have had its impact. But we continue to communicate with U.S. military, and we were told there was a backup plan, that if things go south, the U.S. military will get involved. And they were actually gearing up and preparing for that, because both us and the U.S. military, like you served there, we knew that this deal would not stand, and we will get back on it.
Did you ever see this backup plan or get specifics of it?
I was a part of a trip in, I believe it was in February of 2021 in Garmsir district, where General Miller and myself visited a Navy SEALs camp in Garmsir, and there I saw that there was a plan that the SEALs told us that if the orders were given when the deal goes off completely, they can destroy the Taliban in southern Afghanistan in 9 days. So for me, that sounded like a quite reassuring backup plan.
General, on November 11th, 2020, the former president wrote a memo, and in the memo he said, "I hereby direct you to withdraw all U.S. military forces from the Federal Republic of Somalia no later than 31 December 2020, and from the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan no later than 15 January 2021. Were you familiar with that memo when it was signed? Because it went public.
No, sir, I don't recall. And I apologize for not recalling all of this. I was a combat soldier, and I was always busy fighting. But these things had its impact for sure.
Can you comment on the morale of your forces in 2020?
The morale of the forces went very bad when the Doha deal has happened. It was so dramatic, not only our forces politically, also giving the region the sense that the United States is leaving, a deterrence posture was lost. Politically, we could never recover, Congressman Crow, from what happened in Doha. We were seen as a government that is not respected by its own allies.
Mr. Roggio, I gather we disagree about the impact of the withdrawal from your opening statements. But I do want to just try to flesh out what I believe is a fact, and that is, if we had not abided by the timeline, and I know we actually extended the timeline of the withdrawal of the Doha Agreement, but if we had not abided by the extended timeline of the withdrawal, it was pretty clear from the evidence we've gathered in transcribed interviews and prior hearings that the Taliban would have resumed offensive operations against the United States military in earnest. And at that point, we had 2,500 troops, the lowest amount we had had in almost 20, actually over 20 years. How many troops would the United States had to have surged into Afghanistan if we had not abided by the withdrawal timeline?
I can't speak to the number. I think one of my problems with our policy in Afghanistan has always been a discussion of the number of troops and not the quality of troops that we put in there. We could have put 100,000 cooks in Afghanistan, and it may not have made a difference. But if we'd have put in 5,000 combat forces, probably would have made a significant difference. Sir, you referenced Somalia. President Biden put U.S. troops back into Somalia after President Trump withdrew them. Why did he do so? Because he feared the collapse of the Somali government. Why was Somalia and the collapse of the Somalia government more important than the collapse of our 20-year project in Afghanistan?
Well, Mr. Ojo, on the issue of troops, I agree that composition of a unit is important, but 5,000 combat troops without support, without logistics, obviously does not matter. So would you agree, though, that 2,500 troops on the ground would not have been sufficient, that we would have had to have increased our footprint in Afghanistan?
I do agree that we would have had to have increased our footprint. What that number is, I can't tell you, but again, the Afghan forces were fighting, and Afghanistan did not collapse on August 13th. So the question was Afghanistan important enough to the Biden administration to maintain a U.S. commitment in Afghanistan? If the answer was yes, then he would have had to have put a number of troops back in. And if the answer was no, then as he believed, he ordered a withdrawal. But the withdrawal, as I stated in my verbal testimony, was never conditioned to allow the Afghan government and military to succeed. They were not given a chance. So to answer your question, yes, we would have needed more combat troops in Afghanistan, but how the withdrawal was executed was entirely predictable, and we all witnessed the results of that.
Thank you for that. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member.